Hey guys, Shane here, so welcome to this painting tutorial, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at painting Alpine Miniatures 135th US Tank Crewman. So flashing up here are all the paints and products used, so do feel free to pause and take note. So first thing I've done is I've given our figure here a coat of primer, and in this case this is some Mr. Hobby Surfacer 1200, and I've allowed this to dry a good 24 hours before we move on to the next step. So I actually haven't painted a figure in about 8 or 9 months, so I decided I'm going to leave this step in, which is me painting his face here. Now I have a full tutorial on how I paint faces and flesh, and a link to that video should be showing up on your top right hand corner of your screen, and is also linked in the video description. So I'm using the AK Interactive Flesh set here, and I'm firstly laying down a coat of base flesh, or dark shadow flesh should I say. And I'm just going to start focusing this lighter skin tone here on his cheeks, the ridge of his brow, his nose, and I'm just kind of start picking out these details here. I'm leaving the shadow flesh in the more shadowed areas, more recessed areas of the sculpt. So now I'm going in with their highlight flesh. Again, I'm using this very sparingly, and I'm just going to focus this colour really onto the tops of his cheeks, his chin, the bridge of his nose, and the most pronounced parts of his brow. Again, I really want to use as little of this colour as I can. Now you can see me that I'm slowly building this up. I'm not trying to do it on one go. I'm just doing a small section of his face with its lighter colour at a time, just really focusing it into areas I want, and then I'll kind of blend it out as I go. But I'm just taking my time, kind of seeing which way the face takes shape here. And if I don't like a colour, I can always go back to a darker shade and add in a bit of complexion. So I'm just going to add some Flejo Game Colour flesh shade here. I'm going to focus that into his cheeks, just to give him a bit of a complexion. I've also painted in his eyes, and what I did there was I took the highlight flesh, mixed a bit of off-white into it, and that's the whites of his eyes, and then I just took a bit of Flejo Prussian blue for the pupils of his eyes. So now moving on to the uniform proper, we're going to give it a pre-shade of Model Air Panzer Dark Grey. So I'm going to mask off his face so we don't destroy our work with a little bit of blue tack here, or poster tack. So I've thinned down the Model Air colour here with a few drops of Flow Improver, just 1 or 2 drops. I turned down my PSI here on my Harder and Steenbeck Revolution here, or Evolution should I say, to about 15 PSI. And I'm just going to start tracing in areas I feel where shadow's going to form here. Really kind of focusing on the inside of his legs, the inside of his jacket, the inside of his arms, areas like that. Also areas I feel I might miss when I'm painting, just as an insurance policy that we don't have any of the primer showing through. So now I'm going to move on to basing his jacket, and I'm kind of going for more of an M41 style jacket rather than the M43 HBT style. So this is more of a tan colour. So I'm going to take more of bit of khaki, a little bit of German camo beige, and a small amount of Russian uniform. I'm going to mix them together. It's really just going to be a mostly khaki Russian uniform mix right now with a small amount of German camo beige. Now I have a wet palette just out of screen here, you can kind of see in the corner of the shot. And it doesn't have to be perfect right now, because we're going to be manually painting our highs and lows into this jacket, so we're going to be doing our own highlights and shadows rather than using a wash. But I really want this tone to be more of a greenish hue, so I'm going to really ensure that I make sure I have quite a bit of Russian uniform in this mix. I've also thinned down this paint quite a bit with a little bit of water. So you can see it is a little bit transparent, so it's going to take a few coats just to build this up. Which is a good thing also, because that means some of the pre-shades will actually show through, and we can keep that in certain areas by just applying less layers of paint over those areas. Now for his shirt, we're going to take our same mixture, and I'm just going to add a little bit of green ochre to that mix. These will be a very similar shade to each other, but I just want them to have a slight different hue, just to break them up a little bit. So I'll just take in the same mixture, or whatever mixture you decided to go with those colours, and then just mix a little bit of green ochre into that mix, just to give it a slightly warmer hue to it. Now for his helmet, I'm just going to take some Vallejo US Olive Drab, so straight out of the bottle, just thinned down with a little bit of water, and I'm going to block in his helmet. So let's move on to basing his trousers, and for this we're going to use US Olive Drab and Russian Uniform. It's going to be predominantly Olive Drab to Russian Uniform, so about 70% Olive Drab to 30% Russian Uniform. Just gives it a slightly lighter hue of an Olive Drab colour, because I don't want to be too dark, it just helps the subsequent highlight layers later on. You'll also notice that I've pre-shaded his boots as well, which are the winter variant boots. So this uniform is an earlier version uniform, especially his jacket and tunic, but the boots themselves are actual winter boots. So this figure would be more appropriate for late 44, so you're going into like the winter of 44, so invasion of Germany, Battle of the Bulge era. So now to paint in his dust goggles, I'm just going to take some of our Vallejo Model Air German dark grey, or Panzer dark grey should I say, and I'm just going to very carefully cut this detail in. So I'm going to take some German uniform for model colour, I'm going to thin it down, and I'm going to paint in his scarf that is just barely visible around his neck, and I'm going to very carefully cut in this colour. Now, looking back, I really should have painted this maybe Russian Uniform, which is a slightly darker colour. This would have made highlighting it a little bit easier in the long run. But again, I just took the colours I had at hand. Now this actually proved to be a pretty tricky little piece to paint in actually. I had to be very careful not to paint onto the helmet. And speaking of the helmet, his chin strap is folded over the back lip of his helmet, and I'm just going to take some Vallejo Model Air khaki, or should I say Model Colour khaki, to paint in his chin strap there. So now moving on to the jacket highlights, so we're going to take our previous mixture, and I'm just going to add more German camo beige to that mix. Just a little bit at first. I don't want it to be too stark just yet. We're going to start slowly working up this highlight, and I'm going to start focusing this lighter colour on the tops of creases and any areas where the material is taut or like tight around him, so it means there's no area for shadow to form. Again, I've thinned down this paint, this time a little bit heavier. I put in a few drops of water into it, so it is somewhat transparent, which helps with the transitions between darker and light colours. Now you can see that I'm not giving you like 100% ratios for these different mixtures. In reality, it's really up to you what you want to add and what you don't want to add. So what I would recommend is just have a wet palette and mix your colours to a tone, having a reference material beside you that you feel is accurate to it, and then add and take highlight or shadow colours into those mixtures as you need them. If I feel a colour is too light or too dark for a highlight, I'll just add more German camo beige to the mixture, and I'll just keep going until I'm happy. So here on his back, I'm just working on the tops of creases, and I'm also focusing this colour quite a bit across his shoulders. Again, this is areas where the light will catch. Now these models are so well sculpted that they will literally show you where to put the highlights on just from the way it's sculpted. So I'm just kind of focusing this on the tops of any type of raised details. Also I'm tracing around pockets and seams just to draw attention to them. Now we're going to push our highlight even further, and we're going to take our previous mixture and I'm going to mix a little bit of Vallejo Model Colour Sunny Skin Tone. Now this is, as you can see, really lightens up this colour, and it's really up to you how much Sunny Skin Tone you want to go with. So I always just recommend just putting a small amount of Sunny Skin Tone into your mixture first, like maybe just 10%, and then start adding and taking as you need. Now I'm going to be quite disciplined with this colour. I'm going to really focus this on the leading edges of his jacket. I've thinned this colour down quite a bit actually. There's quite a bit of water in this just to keep it light, keep it flowing. It's not a glaze level yet, and it hasn't even become a wash level. It's just a good drop of water and not too much on my brush. And I'm using a 1/0 brush. So I might as well talk about the brushes I'm using here. So I actually bought some of the MIG or Ammo of MIG paintbrush sets just because of the lockdown. I couldn't really go into the art shop and buy my normal Winsor and Newtons. And I will do a video review of these brushes later on, so when I've done a bit more work with them. And so far they're okay. They're okay. They They don't hold up to the type of abuse I put brushes through, but so far so good though, and I do feel that they hold up quite well during this video. So now going back to his shirt here, we're going to go back to the previous mixture that we used for basing his shirt, and I'm just going to add more green ochre to that mixture, just lightening it up ever so slightly. Again, you can see how subtle this is. It's not immediately apparent that I'm using a lighter colour, but again, I'm just going to start working this onto the tops of creases and any type of area that I just want to draw attention to. Because I do want these two articles of clothing between the jacket and the shirt just to be a little bit different, so they don't get kind of lost amongst the other. Again, it might not be the most accurate, you know, because these all would have been kind of dyed a similar tone, but as, you know, figure painters, we do want to kind of exaggerate certain details, you know, just so people can actually see and admire the sculpt of the model, basically. Like, you know, you're just trying to get the most out of the sculpt. And I'm just going to keep pushing these values by adding more of the green ochre to our shirt mixture here. So I'm going to take some sunny skin tone again, so this is going to be our next highlight for his shirt. I'm going to mix a drop or two into our mixture, and I'm going to start edging out this detail. So I'm going to refocus this on the tops of creases, some of the seam lines that run around the jacket here, or should I say, I keep calling it the jacket, it's the shirt I'm working on, sorry. So the green ochre mixed in with the sunny skin tone gives it a very warmer hue, while still kind of giving it that canvas kind of khaki-esque look. I know that US equipment wasn't khaki as such, but it does have that kind of look and feel to it, if you get me. Sometimes we just have to use colours that are not actually the correct terminology, but will do the same job. So now I'm just edging out these highlights. I'm just focusing on the leading edges for the most part. So now we're going to start adding our shadows, and I set myself the challenge in this build to manually paint in the shadows rather than using a wash. So we're going to take our jacket mix, so the base colour that we use for our jacket, we're going to go back to that, and I'm going to add a little bit of German camo black brown to it. And I'm going to start edging in these details. So I've switched down to a 1-0 brush, I've thinned this down with quite a bit of water, and I'm just going to start working this into the depth of creases, the folds of clothes, that type of thing, the edges of these pockets, just to try to separate out these details. Now you can see I'm not being all that careful with this, for the simple fact I'm holding this model about 2 feet away from myself so I can see it on camera. So again, I'm just like focusing on these little details just inside the creases here. Now this did take me a long time, no lie here, this is an involved step. But I actually had to admit, I really enjoyed it. I used to be very much intimidated by painting in manually in my shadows. I used to just use a wash for this. But the more I experiment with it, I actually get a bit more confident with it. Now, that's not entirely true because I do use a wash here for his like inner shirt, because I just could not see the details, so I just put a bit of Agrat's Earthshade into his inner shirt. Now we're moving back to our trousers to add our highlights. We're going back to our olive drab and Russian uniform mixture. And I'm just going to add a little bit of German camo beige into that mix, and this is going to be our highlight. I don't really need to add a shadow layer to this, the colour is dark enough as it is. So I'm just going to carefully start working this colour in, and I don't want this to go too strong. So just a small amount of camo beige. about maybe 10 or 15% camo beige to our original mixture here for the base of the trousers. So again, I'm just kind of working this up in kind of small layers at a time. So this did take quite some time, but it's one of those things where if you kind of don't rush yourself and just take your time with it, you do get a lovely end result. So again, just don't put pressure on yourself. Allow the figure to paint itself, really. To add some extra highlights, I'm going to be very disciplined with this. I'm just going to add a little bit of sunny skin tone into this mixture, a tiny amount. I mean, like maybe 5% into the previous layer. And I'm just going to focus this colour onto the real leading edges of these trousers. And you can kind of see that even with just a tiny amount of sunny skin tone, it is very, very bright in the previous colours. You know, you can notice it immediately. And I don't want to lose the deep kind of woolen OD trousers that he's wearing, so I'm being very careful not to push these highlights too far on these trousers. So I decided even to take the highlights in certain areas a little bit further, so I added a little bit more sunny skin tone in, and I'm switched right down to, again, my 1/0 brush, and I'm just going to focus these literally on the most leading elements, so like on like the fly of his trousers, on the area where his hands are in his pockets, some of the leading areas of the creases, and that's about it. I'm going to be very careful here. I don't want to go too far. I just want to add a little bit more fidelity to some of these details here. So just like leading some of these large creases on the front of these trousers, and that's kind of all I really want to pick out here. I'm not going to go back onto every high spot, just a few little areas here just to add a little bit more interest. So this was a very tedious step, and I kind of remember during several times when working on this figure is like, why did I make myself do this step? But I think I do feel it did add just a slightly extra element of detail. So I'm just going to add a small amount of German camo beige to our olive drab for the helmet, and I'm going to stipple it onto the top of his helmet just to add a little bit of wear. I didn't really add too much highlights or shadows to the helmet. I don't think helmets really need them because just from what they are, but I just added a slight one. And then I added a little bit of sunny skin tone to our Panzer Dark Grey, and I'm going to start edging in some edge highlights to his dust goggles here. So sorry this is a little bit out of shot, but this actually turned out to be a pretty tricky little step to highlight because I didn't want to get this colour all over his helmet and destroy our previous work. So I'm just taking my time and just slowly building up this highlight. I'm also going to take a little bit more khaki and just work it back into the chin strap here just to draw a bit more detail to it. So for the lenses I'm just going to take some Prussian blue and I'm going to thin it down and slowly paint that in to the areas. I'm going to kind of focus it really on the tops. I'm going to leave some of the preceding German Panzer Dark Grey showing through at the bottom. Just add a hint of glass if you like. And then what I'll do is I'll add a tiny amount of sunny skin tone to the Prussian blue and stipple this lighter colour onto the leading kind of top corners of the goggles just to give a slight reflective quality. Again, I don't want to go too crazy here, it's very easy to overdo it, so I'll leave it at that basically. Or to work on some of the leather details, I'm going to take some flat brown and red leather and roughly mix them about 50-50, and I'm going to start working on the leather strap on the top of his helmet here. Again, this is a little bit tricky to keep in shot, so sorry for it being out of focus. So a nice little detail that I really like to add to my helmets, and you often see them in reference photos and the original photographs, is that the leading lips of the helmet, or the edges of the helmet, have like bare metal showing through. So I'm just going to take some mod layer steel and just run it around some of the leading edges of the helmet here. Just on the lip of the helmet, and it just adds a nice little bit of wear, and it's also something that is actually very prominent on M1 helmets. So now I'm going to start working on his buttons, and for that we're just going to take some model colour German camo black brown. So I'm going to thin down the camo black brown quite a bit with water, and again I'm switched down to my 2-0 brush here, and we're going to start very carefully adding the button details. So it's actually a little bit hard to see because all these light colours, it actually kind of dazzles you a little bit, so you're a little bit hard to see actually where you're meant to paint these in. So now for these snow boots, so I'm going to take some of our German Dark Grey, or Panzer Dark Grey should I say, and I'm going to mix a small amount of sunny skin tone into it, and I'm going to focus this light colour on the toes of these boots and then get the raised details. So we're going to add some markings to our figure here. I'm going to take the US Army Decal set or Decal set from Passion Models, and we're going to take some US armor markings. I'm also going to take the Brooklyn USA marking and some of his ranks, and we're going to give this figure a little bit more character. First thing is first, we're going to add a little bit of gloss varnish over the areas that we're going to apply our decals, just to prevent any silvering. So it's going to brush on some Vallejo gloss varnish. Some people don't do this, but the carrier film on the Passion model decals are a little bit strong, so I just want to make sure we don't get any silvering. So once the varnish has been allowed to dry for 24 hours, we're going to start applying our decals. And for that, I'm going to use some microsol and microset, or microset and microsol, should I say. We're going to slowly start working these decals onto his back. So on his back we have Brooklyn NY USA. On his left shoulder we have his US Armoured branch insignia. So once the decals have been allowed to set and cure, we're going to start assembling the model. So I'm just going to add a little bit of super glue here to glue his arm into position. I used a little bit of stretch brew to make his cigarette. It's nothing too complicated there. And now we're going to seal our model, and for that we're going to use some Vallejo Premium Matte Varnish. So this is thinned down with their airbrush thinner, so I tend to use airbrush thinner from Vallejo only for varnishes. And I sprayed this pretty high. This is about 22-23 psi. I find that their primers and their varnishes like to be sprayed at relatively high pressures. So just do quick blasts and build it up over a few layers. And with that, our tanker is now finished. So guys, I really hope you enjoyed this video. This was actually a great little project to work on, and he's actually going to be making an appearance in my Flak 88 diorama, so he's going to be the figure accompanying that diorama, which I forgot to mention in this video. Big thank you to all you guys for watching. We recently broke the 20,000 subscriber mark, so thank you so much guys for your continued support and for making this channel what it is. So thank you so much guys, and I really do hope that we continue to create such a great little community here. So thank you so much guys. And again, big thank you to my patrons. I'm getting quite a few now who are joining the brigade over on Patreon now. So if you guys would like to join and for $1 and get early access to videos, I'm also thinking about doing a podcast maybe once every week or every fortnight, like a little hobby podcast for patrons, just as a little thank you. So if you guys want to check that out, I would be very grateful, should I say. So thank you so much for watching guys, and I'll catch you in the next video. I've been Shane, and bye bye.